There are concerns that stop and search powers could be extended under the new policing bill. Campaigners are calling for an end to stop and search powers, which let the police search people, vehicles for drugs, weapons without a warrant. Under the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Bill, the government want to introduce serious violence reduction orders, which would make it easier for police to check people who've been convicted of carrying a knife. I'm sure there are other ways to solve crime, but they never seem to go there. Campaigners have also said it will cause unnecessary racism against certain ethnic minorities. In a moment, Weyman Bennet, co-governor of Stand Up to Racism First. Our friend Norman Brennan, retired cop, director of the Law and Order Foundation. Afternoon to you, Norman. I know most police officers never say this is the full answer, but it's part of the armoury of what the police do. Would that be reasonable?
Absolutely. Stop and search is a small part of what policing actually does. The sad reality is it's the most controversial part of what policing do. For the simple reason is we have to target people that carry knives and carry guns and murder other individuals. And the police are caught between a rock and a hard place. Your previous texter said that police now wear body cameras. So the public, communities and the courts can see exactly what happened on stop and search. Now, when you look at crime, particularly in London where I'm based and where I policed for 31 years, I carried out hundreds and hundreds of stop and searches in my 31 years. I recovered probably 100, 150 knives. Every time I recovered a knife, I thought I saved or possibly saved somebody else's life or the carrier's life. Now, when you look at disproportionality, in London, when I was in a robbery squad, I would come in every morning and I would look at all the crimes that happened in the previous 24 hours that have now come in. And almost without exception, it was in excess of 70% were committed by young black men and youths. So it would not be right that I would go out and then stop, for example, 70% of white people, because that would be discriminatory.
For that particular crime, it would make no sense, right?
Absolutely. So what I did, or what my team did, and I was on a robbery squad for 6 years, we went out and we targeted the people that fit the descriptions.
We seem to just lost.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. So you targeted people who fitted those descriptions. Norman, let me just put some of that to Weyman Bennet, co-governor of Stand Up to Racism. I mean, this is intelligence-led policing, Weyman, isn't there? What's wrong with that?
Well, unfortunately, for the facts don't fit the experience that the officer. I understand what he's just said, but according to statistics from the GLA on policing, the police committee there, that less than 2% of the people that are stopped in for stop and search actually leads to any kind of conviction. And of course, I mean, I was a teacher in London for 15 years. Yep. I'm not saying that I didn't meet young people that carried knives, and we didn't have to persuade them. We didn't use physical force against them. We weren't entitled to. But I also, unfortunately, my own personal experience has been stopped and searched. My children have been stopped and searched. My grandfather was stopped and searched. And the Macpherson inquiry, after very careful analysis of the Metropolitan Police, produced information that said that that the consequence of stop and search amongst black communities was disproportionate. Now, the officers just made a series of factual things that can be tested. People can go and look at the statistics themselves about crime in London and the proportionality of the people that are involved in crime, because he's just made a very strong assertion that the people, 70% of people, which is the figures that he's just produced, were involved in robbery, are black inside London. I would dispute that because the facts don't show that. And I think there's a strong view in the police to criminalise black people.
Is that? Let's put that to Norman. Norman, I mean, Weyman is doubting your figures and suggests that there is a kind of a, either conscious or even subconscious attempt, I think I've got this right, to criminalise black people.
No, I've been retired over 10 years. I was giving you the examples back then. It hasn't really changed much at all. And don't forget, my expertise of over 40 years of law and order, 31 years as a police officer, is gun and knife crime. I interact with the black community. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm colorblind. If somebody has been stabbed or somebody has been murdered, and I've met over 1,000 families, I don't give a monkeys about the color of that person, their creed, their sex, their age. That family needs help and support. So I'm in a very good position because I tell you the truth. It doesn't sit well with some people, I appreciate that. But I've been following murder, gun and knife crime in London for the past 10 years. I post on it regularly on social media. And the young men and young youths and children that are carrying knives, that are murdering fellow youths and children and sometimes men, are predominantly in the London area, are young black men. That is a fact.
Okay, Weyman, what do we do with it? Because we do know that on that specific issue of knife crime, victims are young black kids, perpetrators are young black kids. That doesn't count for other areas of criminality. I get that. But on that point that Norman is raising, that there's something here, isn't there, that needs to be... We need to fess up on this one and say, look, there is a reality, and therefore when police are out in those neighbourhoods where there are high crime areas involving knife, it's going to be more black kids that get pulled over.
Well, I mean, it's clear, like in Glasgow, which was done about the crime reduction scheme, that they wanted to treat knife crime as something that needed to be reduced. Which is very obvious to all of us, is that policing it has been completely, has not been effective. That's not been the best way to reduce knife crime. Increasing number of police officers, probably the most effective way, which is from the Glasgow study, has been increasing youth workers, actually trying to tackle poverty, as the Manchester Chief Commissioner, who's also got 40 years of experience with dealing with Gunchester inside Manchester, of dealing with crime, talked about the key causes of knife crime was consequence to linked to poverty. Now, what a lot of, and to be honest with you, one of the problems we've had is why there's a lack of trust within the police force about this, is that when you become in contact with the police, like I'm looking for somebody black who may be involved in a crime in an area which has got high proportion of a black community, you're just randomly stopping people. I don't want to be dismissive about it, but during that time, Michael Gove was sniffing cocaine which is a crime, which he admits, right? He wouldn't have been stopped by the police when this officer was there.
He might have been, mightn't he? I don't know. He once made a reference to the fact that he wasn't. I'm not suggesting he was, but I mean, he might have. The police stopped plenty of people with Class A drugs on them, and lots of white people as well.
Yes, but I'm trying to say that if you're just looking for white people that are involved in knife crime, you'd be stopping a lot of people, right? What I'm trying to say to you is the strategy that was put forward is ineffective. And if we're honest about drugs and crime in London, where it's been experienced, my view is where people were on the right side, the wrong side of the law, or whichever way you put it, many of these people were well known to the police. They were never stopped and searched. Many of the people that were involved in what I call major drug offensive were not stopped and searched. And my personal belief was, as in the Stephen Lawrence inquiry, the senior officer that was involved in that had close links with organized crime. And that was the reason why he didn't investigate the Stephen Lawrence inquiry.
Okay, so
something which we've never really looked at properly.
Norman,
and I believe that if we want to stop organized crime, we have to look at the levels of collusion at that particular level that allow serious crime to take place inside London.
Okay.
And there's not really serious attempt to break that.
All right, Norman, come back in on that.
You make a number of points about poverty, and some of the issues that you highlight I agree with. You cannot keep on bashing today's police officers with the Stephen Lawrence baseball bat. You made an allegation against the senior officer. I know all about that. I actually spoke to the officer, DCC Ailing, that put the inquiry together for McPherson. McPherson went through 12 separate definitions of what a racist crime was. And in the end, it was basically the victim, if they felt that it was a racist incident, the police had to record it. Put all that aside, we are 35 years or 30 years plus on now. What I will say is this: we keep on hearing what the black community, or some sections of the black community, because the mothers and fathers and families that have a black child stabbed or shot to death, plead with us in the mortuaries to do something, anything, to stop these murders. So the police do something. They go out and they stop and search. And what I will say to some sections of the black community and community leaders is this: you always seem to condemn the police trying to do what they can. We wear body cameras. You can see exactly how some people are very obstructive. And whilst you criticize the police constantly, I have never heard any of your groups or people like you come up with an alternative. And stop and search is not the only tool in the toolbox. If you want the police to stop and searching, I promise you this, and I'm one of Britain's independent law and order campaigners, and I care about all communities, as I said at the beginning, you will have anarchy on the streets of London and other parts of Britain because police will refuse to stop and search.
Weyman, what is the alternative then? Would you like to see stop and search stopped?
I refer him, obviously, over the 4 years ago, there was an inquiry by Theresa May into stop and search, in which he pointed out that the majority of stop and searches was ineffective. The very thing that people want, which is a lowering of crime, was not helped by officers using that time to randomly stop and search people. That was ineffective. So it's not true that people are saying that everybody, that there should be no investigation into murder. After all, I'm actually very familiar with families that have lost.
Okay, but do you want to stop and search, Weyman?
What I'm arguing is the increase of stop and searches, 40% increase inside London, did not decrease. Of
course, that was preceded by a massive decrease in stop and search, of course.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say is increasing. We're seeing an increase in stop and search, not a decrease. And what I'm saying is that it's also leading to what I believe is prejudice, the right of, it's not, I'm not making it up. 3 weeks ago, an officer was just arrested because he stopped and searched a black man leaving a cemetery where he broke his leg. And what we're saying is that there's misuse of stop and search.
Yeah, of course. There will always be misuse.
And that's not investigated by the police, or there's no accountability for it.
Gents, I have to, Norman, I do apologise. I have to step in there. We've well overshot the mark. I know there was much more to say on this. Norman Brennan is a retired cop. 30 years in the job. He knows his way around policing. He's another director of the Law and Order Foundation. And Weyman Bennet, the other voice you heard there, co-covenant of Stand Up to Racism. Which one is it? Is that an argument for more stop and search? It's ineffective, we are told. No police officer ever said it was the panacea or the absolute answer. Part of the armoury. Where are you on this one? Is there anything wrong with stop and search?